Hello and welcome to Daily Work Remote Strategies. Our topic today is forcing functions and how forcing functions can be a positive influence in our life. I'll tell you why I even thought about doing this topic. Often when I'm coaching a leader at a company, at the end we'll do an evaluation and the leader will say what really worked for them, what was effective about coaching. And a few times we have gotten comments like this about myself or about other coaches, which is that meeting with this coach has created a very good forcing function for me. So this is something we sometimes hear after coaching. And at first I think about it, okay, meeting with a coach created a good forcing function for you. What does that even mean? And if you think about interaction design, a forcing function, I'll actually read it off, is a behavior shaping constraint in any kind of design of interaction, which means that it is a means of preventing undesirable user input, usually made by mistake. So in a sense, a forcing function can take you from a behavior that you don't want to be doing to a behavior that you do want to be doing. So for those reasons, because we hear that this is a big impact on people when they have a mentor, an advisor, or coach, one of the biggest things that comes out to them as lasting impact on their life is having new routine forcing functions in their life. Because of that, as one piece of data point, and because it's a behavior shaping constraint, I care a lot about how we make change and how we shape behavior, because it's hard. It's hard for all of us to get to the gym, to eat healthy, to be productive, to spend the quality time that we want to with our families. So change can be hard. And I'm always looking for how can we simplify it for ourselves and make it really practical. So today's topic is on positive forcing functions. And I'm going to show you 3 ways that you can implement positive forcing functions into your life. And I'm going to call these specific ways that we're going to be talking about, I'm going to call them the breakfast, lunch, dinner versions. I'm absolutely not talking about food, but I'm talking about 3 different ways that you can implement a positive change that becomes a habit. So let's just start on in and do all 3. The 3 specific kinds of forcing functions that I'll tell you about are physical, so something that you can do physically, emotional, and then mental/spiritual. Let me give you an example. Let's talk about this, and we'll call this the breakfast version. Let's talk about a physical forcing function. Let's suppose, and I'll start with something basic just to be able to build onto it. Suppose you want to start a new habit that is absolutely physical. I'll give you an example. A colleague of mine wanted to be able to raise her hand luggage, which is carrying, well, at the time that all of us were traveling, carrying lots of computer equipment, lots of presentation decks, raise that over her head without any kind of help from people. And we're talking one of those heavier ones, not just what you and I may take for travel. So to do that, she decided, I want some sort of, she didn't say forcing function, but I want some sort of habit so that I can train and basically have this not even be an issue. That's a physical forcing habit. It has to do with body. So what she did is into her morning routine, you know, the thing we all do between shower and brushing teeth and getting ready, she implemented additional arms exercises and core exercises. Super simple example. But what I will say to you is if you have a physical thing you want to do, exercise, food, drinking more water, whatever it might be, if you want to do that, the way to implement a physical forcing function is with an if-then. There's a ton of research on if-then thinking. This is started and pioneered by Peter Gallwitzer as a researcher. And you can do this with physical things like getting stronger. I'll tell you one that I've used as an example, and then I'll ask what are some that you've used. I sometimes forget to take my vitamins. Again, we're starting basic level, just what is a physical forcing function, then we'll go to emotional forcing functions, and then to mental and spiritual. I want to take my vitamins and I forget. So what do? I set it on the table the night before, the eating table, my kitchen table, so that with breakfast, I remember to take my vitamins. Then I take it off the table. It's not, I like to have a clean table with flowers from time to time. It's not the best looking thing right in the middle of my table, but it reminds me. It's a physical reminder. So is that one clear? Is it clear if you want to create a forcing function, a behavior change on something really basic like exercise, food, meditation, even sleep, try to tie all that to an if-then function. any kind of if-then function. If something happens, I'm going to turn my phone off and go to bed, whatever that is. If it's 9 p.m., if I've read 30 pages of a book, whatever that might be. So that's the base level. That's a forcing function at the physical level. I like to call that breakfast, because you can think of my vitamin example. That's a breakfast forcing function. Now let's move further on in the day. We'll call this lunch. And again, this doesn't have to do with eating. The lunch forcing function is about your emotions and how you can set something that will take you out of the realm of fast reactivity into something that's a little more tempered. I'll give you an example that a client of mine had. I was working with a leader a couple of years ago who said, Senia, I will admit, and I have anger management issues. I know about it. My colleagues know about it. My family knows about it. I've been working on it. But one of the things that I do is when I'm on a conference call, and this is before so many video calls, or he had conference calls, on a conference call, I will just jump in. So if I disagree, I really think it's important to be right. And if I disagree with something, I'll just jump in. And I know I sound angry. I know I come across as angry, but that's what I've been doing. And it's what works for me. But I also am getting feedback that I'm a little too angry. So maybe it hasn't worked so well for me. So we talked and figured out what are some things. And we talked a little bit, again, creating a forcing function for happiness, productivity in this leader's life. We talked about cold anger and hot anger. So hot anger is what you feel when you're triggered. Somebody has done something that's, it feels wrong. It feels like not the right thing, whether for yourself or for somebody else. That's, you want to react. And cold anger is when you step back a little bit and you actually give your brain time to process. You might take a breath, and then you're still angry. You haven't lost that feeling of anger, but you approach the situation from the point of view of, I want to make a comment about this. I want a solution, a resolution. So that is, what did the executive do after figuring out he didn't want this interaction? You're gonna laugh a little bit. And the reason I tie it to lunch is he would actually do this more after lunch meetings. When he's on a call and somebody says something and it really upsets him and he wants to correct it and give the right information, he will stay on mute a little longer. So he started staying on mute on all of his calls. And just in the time it takes you to unmute, that's a forcing function. In that time that it takes you to unmute, you can unmute, or you can say, hey, maybe I'll address this later. So that's forcing function number 2. Again, in review, we've talked about a physical forcing function, which you can think of as breakfast and vitamins. We're talking about a lunchtime, which is if you have these phone calls that are triggering you, you might be a little bit hangry and a little bit hungry already just before lunch. If you are on these kinds of calls, and I'm not saying this is your situation, but if you have a tendency to be triggered by something, what is a forcing function you can create for an emotional trigger? And I'll give you 2. So one is something that's like pressing the mute button and waiting to get off. And another is knowing, if I'm triggered, I'm going to take a breath, or I need to step away and go into another room. My kids, truthfully, they know that sometimes when the tensions are high at home, if I'm saying I need to go to the restroom, that doesn't necessarily mean I need to go. I just need a moment alone. So I know sharing sort of my own home thing, but it's your own, how do you come back to center? So either do something like hit the mute button, or how do you take a breath? Do you go for a walk literally around your apartment, your home? Do you take a breath? Do you walk into a different room? And we'll call that the lunch forcing function. I'll give you one other example. Sean Aker, who is a fabulous author, I'm a big fan of his. One forcing function that he uses, he decided to watch less TV. He wanted to watch less TV. This is literally the forcing function that he came up with, which is, I'm going to take my remote control and I'm going to take the batteries out of it. And I'm going to put it in a drawer. Now, it doesn't take a long time to take it out of the drawer and put the batteries back in. It's about 20 seconds, he says. But it's enough of a 20-second deterrent that it can lead more to a forcing function of reading more books, spending more time with family, just relaxing without doing anything. I'd love to ask, what is a forcing function that would be helpful for you on that emotional front? So something where you might get a little triggered, or something where you know a situation makes you feel uncomfortable or tends to make you feel sad or almost dark. What's a forcing function you can create? So give that a moment. I'd love to hear your comments. I'll read them off. So back to our things. We've got the physical, we've got the emotional, and now we're going to mental and spiritual. I'm giving that to you as a breakfast, lunch, and dinner format. Breakfast, again, was with the vitamins. Lunch is what if you actually regulate your tone before lunch when you might be hungry. What is emotional or spiritual constraint? When is it that you may need to give yourself a constraint? There are a few different things. So this could have to do with things that you know push at your boundaries. And all of us are different. But I'll tell you something that's really uncomfortable for me. If I have a last meeting of the day, whenever it might be, let's say it's a phone call from 4 to 5 p.m., and then the person on the other end of that video or phone call says, oh, Senia, can you just stay 5 minutes on longer? For me, that's unpleasant, because for me, whatever that end time is, that's a constraint that I'm going to go and do things with my kids. So I likely could stay a few minutes later, but it's not comfortable for me. It's just a little bit, it pushes at my boundary. And I'll just tell you now, I'm recognizing a few of you on this call from previous sessions. These are all the things that other coaches have talked about in terms of our own self-care, our stress. If you keep giving in to little things that are right up against your constraints, it can wear on you. So I will call this the dinner time interaction, and you can think of it as my 5 p.m. constraint. Maybe you have a different one. But if there's something that kind of just goes against the constraints that you've set for yourself, or even a little bit the ethics that you believe in for yourself. I'm not saying something huge. That's a separate situation, a huge ethical situation. That's separate. But just a little bit against yours, and you feel, ugh, something's wrong. What can you do as a forcing function in these situations? And I hope that the question is clear. So let's use my example of, I know I want to get off my call at 5 p.m. I also know I don't need to leave the house until 5:10. So I have that wiggle room, but I want that wiggle room. I want to tidy up around my desk. I want to get ready to close the day off. So right at that border of being not comfortable, here's something you can use. I'll talk about it as my friend. I have a friend who has been a competitive cyclist, a competitive speed cyclist, and she was in charge of the business development group in her department. She was a lawyer at her business, and nobody ever came to her desk with an emergency on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Every other day, there were emergencies at 5 p.m., at 5:30, at 6. Tuesdays, never an emergency at 5 p.m. Everybody knew that she had a training session with her coach that she needed to leave work on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Everybody knew that about her life. So she set in advance kind of this preemptorial setting where everybody knows, oh, that is my constraint. I have that constraint. So I invite you to set those kinds of constraints for those things that are just at the boundary of comfortable. You may be familiar with what Brene Brown calls being clear, and that it's kind. It's sometimes kinder to be clear with these kinds of constraints. I'm going to summarize what we've been talking about, and then I'll open it up to questions. So what we've been talking about are creating a forcing function. I'll give you the definition from interaction design. It is a behavior shaping constraint. So something that shapes your behavior so you don't do the things you don't want to do. We can do that at the physical level, the emotional level, and the mental, spiritual level. At the physical level, think of it like breakfast and putting that vitamin next to your breakfast on your completely empty kitchen table. For lunch, you can think about it as that, okay, I know that I might have an emotional reaction. How can I calm that in the moment? How can I hit the stop button? How can I create a forcing function so that in that moment, I'm not having an extreme reaction for myself? And then the final one is sort of how do I create those constraints in my life? How can I say no in a comfortable way? Those are our big ones. And as a bonus, I'm going to give you a 1-minute overview into a third thing that you can use. So you've got this breakfast, lunch, dinner. You can use a dessert forcing function. So you may notice all of these examples that I've given are about things that are important to do. Exercise, sleep, they're important to do. Not losing one's temper, not being too triggered to be able to think clearly. But a dessert forcing function could be, and I bet all of you are running off to get lunch right after this talk. A dessert forcing function could be, what do you most want to go towards? What's aspirational? What's exciting for you? So I'll give you some examples of dessert forcing functions. Reading to your child before bed. You don't have to do that, but it could be something that's fun for you, fun for them. There are some companies that almost create forcing functions that are fun at the beginning of meetings. For example, I once had a presentation to DuPont, and DuPont is all about safety. So at the beginning of every presentation, they have one slide on safety, every presentation. I thought that was really cool. What is a positive forcing function that you can add into your life? I'll give you one that I've been doing with my kids. We now read a riddle a day after dinner at the dinner table, just because I thought I want them to keep thinking of creatively and exploring with their mind. So it's something I thought, how can we do this? But I will also tell you, even after giving you this breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert framework, it is tricky. It's hard to decide what the forcing functions that you most want are. And then it's hard to figure out how to get them into your life in a way that works. Are you going to use that breakfast if then, if this, then that? Are you going to use that pause and the difference between cold anger and hot anger of the lunch? Or are you going to use that dinner of like how to set those no constraints even in advance? Or are you going to do something aspirational? I invite you to play around with it and just think forcing functions could be good. They could help me do the things I most want to do. Thank you for your time with me today. Okay, we are open to questions, any questions you have. And if you have to go, go. Our point is that these are 20-minute webinars. Good to see you. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Tomorrow is Eileen Schaefer with 2 tools for leadership. I am open to your questions. I'm going to be checking the questions on our 2 places. And I'm delighted to be with you today. So let's see. Currently, we've got some questions. Okay. Very cool. So I'm going to answer these 2 questions. I'll read this one directly. I'm an ambitious person and a night owl, but I need to be alert for a first shift job, and I struggle to go to bed in time to get enough sleep. Still trying to find the right forcing function for that, but it helps to define a time in advance and to make it a half hour to an hour before I actually need to be asleep. You know, I am actually going to ask the people on this call, what do you recommend for this person? This person is an ambitious person and a night owl, but needs to be alert. What are some things you could recommend to this person as a forcing function? And I say that because it's sometimes easier to help someone else with their situation than it is for a person to help themselves. So let's see what people are saying. What do you want to recommend for our guest who is an ambitious person and a night owl, but needs to be alert? What's the right forcing function? I'll ask a clarifying question of this person. Would you please let me know, do you prefer to go to bed when you are more calm, or do you actually prefer to go to bed when your thoughts are racing so that you can kind of mull them over a little bit in bed? So more calm or more on, but then using bedtime as a way to resolve your thoughts? What's your preference between those 2, if any? Other suggestions for this person? You need some unwind time to calm. Okay, I'm going to throw some forcing functions at you. And reading helps, wonderful. And let me know if these, so reading helps, you know that. I would recommend reading without a computer. You may have heard that, but the last hour before bed, the screen time. So that's one thing to do. Reading helps, you're saying. Let's see, what else? Here are some things. Hot shower or hot bath. The smell of something nice, so it could be lavender, it could be a candle, it could be just like a cream that has a smell in it that feels comforting and soothing and calm to you. It could be, you probably don't want to drink too much water before you fall asleep, but it could be a little bit of warm water, which is also very soothing. So I would say, what are comforting, soothing things that add to that unwind time? How do those seem being thrown right at you as suggestions? We'll see what this person says. And as this person's answering, I will read off one other comment. One of the forcing functions I use is I have a post-it on my monitor reminding me to ask before telling, so that I pause now and either ask or restate the other person's ask, or I'll ask a leading question to help guide that person. That's awesome. So I'm a huge fan of what you just said, because I'm a coach and I love questions and I love asking. I love that that's actually not something that comes easy to managers and leaders, because we're often put in a situation of make a decision for me, help me make this decision. What do you want to do? So the fact that you're asking, lovely. Oh, okay, so that helps the sleeping function. Excuse me. In terms of doing something warm. Okay, thank you, everyone. I just drank something funny. Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you. Whoa, I've just turned into a deep voice. Can you hear it? And we'll see you tomorrow with Eileen Schaefer. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.